Join me now is the founder and chairman of the Liberty Council, lc.org. That's the website. He's a regular guest of ours, and he has a huge case going to the Supreme Court. By the way, don't forget, he already won a big case a couple years ago, 9-0 at the U.S. Supreme Court, dealing with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to fly a flag up the flagpole, I think at the Boston City Hall in Boston, Massachusetts. And he won that one 9-0. Now, this one has to do with same-sex marriage. And you might remember the case of Kim Davis, who was persecuted, prosecuted, fined, because she has a Christian worldview and defines marriage by, well, what the Bible, God does, one man, one woman. And now this case that the group Liberty Council, lc.org, has been preparing for 10 years, seems like it is on a fast track. Let's get a report tonight from Matt Staver. Matt, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you, as always.
So 10 years you've been working on this. Give our audience the background. And is it a guarantee? I know the Supreme Court's going to have a conference on it. Does that mean they have a conference on whether to hear it? Or is it going to be a guaranteed hearing?
It's not a guaranteed hearing. They conference this case and decide whether they will take the case. We need 4 justices to vote in favor of taking the case. We need 5 justices, obviously, to win a case. Well, we already have 3 justices, and certainly we don't know how they're going to vote, but we already have 3 justices that have been very clear because they were dissenters in 2015 in the Obergefell v. Hodges so-called same-sex marriage opinion. That's the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who wrote a very strong opinion in his dissent. He said 5 lawyers, that's his words, not mine, 5 lawyers imposed their own will, not a legal judgment, and that the opinion had nothing to do with the Constitution, that they invented their own idea of marriage, contrary to millennia of human history. He was very strong in his dissent. He said that judges and justices cannot make the law, and that's what they did in Obergefell. We also have Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. They were part of that dissent as well. So we have 3 justices that are on the bench that have made strong dissents back in 2015, 10 years ago. And we need 4 justices to take a case, 5 justices to win. But we already have 5 justices in the Dobbs decision in 2022 that overturned the abortion decision, Roe v. Wade, that have rejected what's called substantive due process. There is due process of law, which is procedural. You have a right to be heard. You have a right to know what the accusation is against you. But substantive due process is judge-made. It has no basis in the Constitution. And that is what Roe v. Wade was based upon. And that is what 5 justices rejected in overturning Roe v. Wade. Those 5 justices are still on the bench. And so that, I think, is critical because that's the same foundation on which Obergefell is founded, the same shaky foundation that Dobbs overturned in 2022. That's Obergefell. So I think we have a good opportunity, compelling facts because of Kim Davis. She simply wanted an accommodation of her religious faith, and that simply would be removing her name from the marriage certificates. That's all she asked for. Just remove my name and title from the marriage certificates. And that accommodation was eventually given to her with a new governor within 5 months after all this began in June of 2015. And then she got the accommodation with a unanimously passed statute by the legislature in April 2016. So she got the accommodation she requested. But in the meantime, between June 26, 2015, and mid-December 2015, when she did get the accommodation from the newly elected governor, she was sued. And during that lawsuit, she also was sent to prison for 6 days. And they got their license while she was in prison, people that are part of this case. So why is this case continuing? They got their license. She got the accommodation afterwards. She did lose her liberty for 6 days. Well, because they want to punish her. So they went after her personally. And in 2023, they got a $100,000 judgment against her by a jury simply for their allegation of emotional distress because they said their feelings were hurt.
Oh, boy.
And therefore, Kim should pay her because pay them because she hurt their feelings by not giving them a marriage license with her name on it. And that's where we are now. We are asking the High Court to take the case, to recognize Kim Davis's right to First Amendment as a defense, and to overturn Obergefell, the mess that created this entire process.
So what do you think, Matt, are the chances it will be heard?
I think we have a high chance. Of course, you never can know until they end up voting. But I think we have a high chance. We have a high chance because we have compelling facts. We have a woman who simply asked for a very simple accommodation, an accommodation which the governor of Kentucky, the newly elected Governor Matt Bevin at the time, recognized was easily possible, which a unanimous legislature actually passed and made it clearly possible. Republicans and Democrats came together and gave the accommodation.
So you can have the license, just don't put her name on it. That's all she wanted, right?
Just don't put her name on it because she didn't want to have her name associated with a marriage that does not align with God's definition of marriage as the union of a man and a woman.
So she's being persecuted, targeted, and imprisoned because she has biblical convictions and a Christian worldview.
Yes, and in Obergefell, when that decision came down, the dissenters, particularly Alito, but others, said that what will happen is people of faith will become marginalized. They'll be attacked and targeted because of their position on this issue of same-sex marriage that these 5 lawyers, the Chief Justice's words, invented. And Kim Davis, Justice Thomas later said in 2016, became the first victim of that cavalier opinion. And she won't be the last, and that the Supreme Court needs to correct the mess that it created. So with that as a background, with substantive due process being overturned in 2022, with 3 justices on the bench with strong dissents, with Kim Davis asking for a very simple accommodation, one that she did get, and now she faces $360,000 in fines, and she already has lost 6 days of her personal liberty because of this issue. Those facts together, I think they scream out for the point that the court needs to intervene, take the case, acknowledge religious freedom under the First Amendment as a defense, and acknowledge that the court was wrong in 2015 and overturn Obergefell.
100%.
In fact, make it neutral on this issue. That's what, we have some of the other justices that said in subsequent decisions, like in, for example, Dobbs' decision, we have other justices, newer justices, that were not part of Obergefell, but they were part of Dobbs. They said, regarding abortion, the court needs to become neutral on some of these issues that are not engraft and part of the Constitution. They need to be neutral. And so they became neutral on it. They reversed Roe versus Wade and sent the matter back to the states. Well, there's no same-sex marriage in the Constitution. There's nothing that can, by any stretch of the imagination, be construed to grant a right to same-sex marriage. No way. So in the same way that the justices need to become neutral on it, they need to become neutral on this. Turn it back to the states the way it was before. What they did was they created a mess in 1973 with abortion. They created a mess regarding marriage in 2015. The consequences are catastrophic for Kim, for people of faith, for marriage, for families, for children, and for so much more.
Yep, so this impacts every one of us that claim that we're Christians, that are Christians, that want to live out our Christian worldview in all areas of our life, including our occupation. This is a big, big deal, actually. So I need you to pray for Matt. I need you to pray for Kim. I need you to pray for the hearts of the Supreme Court 9 justices. We need to pray that God will providentially open the doors for this conference to confirm a hearing before the court. Now, if that is confirmed, when are they meeting to do that? Sometime in August, right?
Well, their meeting, their first meeting will be September 29. It's called the Super Conference because a lot of petitions gather during the summer break, and so they review a lot of different petitions. They have scheduled it right now for September 29 to meet. That could change, but right now that's when they will first come back, and that's their first meeting of the year where they will go over these particular petitions. Then they hear oral arguments the first week of October. But they could move it to another time. But what we do know is it will be soon. It will be either that day, September 29, or some day shortly thereafter, they'll make a decision. And if they say yes, they want to take the case, they'll set it for oral argument, which I anticipate would be sometime in probably January, and then a decision by the end of June. This is very similar to the Shurtleff case, as you remember, Brandon. It was on the super conference that last Thursday of September in 2021 where the court convened and they met and they decided to take the Shurtleff versus City of Boston case. I argued it on January 18, and we got the decision in early May of 2022.
So if they take it, will you be the one arguing it before the court?
Yes, I will argue the case if they take it. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity because I think it is a time where the court needs to correct the wrong. Look, somebody says, well, what's the harm? Well, we have a constitutional harm. Obviously, this was invented. There's no basis in the Constitution. The harm also is to Kim Davis. The harm also is to every person of faith and person who believes in marriage as a one man and one woman. The harm also is the policy that this particular decision said that in a very sex-based relationship, a gender-based relationship that is male and female, to say that gender doesn't matter, that you can have two men, two women, doesn't matter. The consequences of that decision go far beyond same-sex marriage because that bleeds over into boys and girls sports, men in private spaces of women, multiple pronouns, polyamory, polygamy, other kinds of iterations of so-called marital unions that you might say. So it has a significant consequence. It also sets as a policy matter, the highest court of the land essentially is saying that children don't need moms and dads. And we know that's a fallacy, that's a lie. Children do best when they are raised with a mother and a father.
Amen. Amen to that. So obviously we need you to pray for Matt, pray for the justices, but also you can support Liberty Counsel, lc.org, lc.org. Okay, before we conclude, Matt, are you, what kind of response are you getting from the mainstream corporate media? And are they interviewing you with gotcha questions? Are they truly interested in this? Are they trying to make you out to be some kind of, religious extremist or Kim to be like that? Are they, are you getting hate mail and email and letters and phone calls there at Liberty Counsel? How is this going down for you?
Well, so far, the so-called mainstream media, if you will. Yeah. The mainstream media has been fairly neutral and they've been respectful. We did an interview with some major mainstream media and they were very straightforward and respectful so far. However, what we have experienced is once it gets into some of the LGBTQ media, then there's some really radical, violent people that start harassing us. And we've already had to call in law enforcement to look at phone calls and other threats because every time that happens where this goes out into the media and it goes into the LGBTQ kinds of rags and intranet programs that they do, then we get direct threats. So we take additional threat seriously, and we're prepared for the threats. We're not going to be intimidated, but I can tell you for sure that the threats have significantly increased.
Yeah, I bet they have. Well, again, another reason to pray for Matt and his entire team there at lc.org. And by the way, you can sign up for his regular newsletters and keep up on what's going on this case and many other vital cases dealing with religious liberty and religious freedom that Matt and his team are fighting on behalf of all of us. lc.org, lc.org. Matt, I know you're in big demand right now, so thank you for making time for us here.
Thank you, Brandon. Always for you.
Thank you. You're very kind. Matt Staver checking in. Folks, seriously, get his newsletter, lc.org. You'll be glad you did because you're going to keep up with stories that you're not going to be told about by the mainstream media. I was reading his newsletter the other day, and I found out about a couple news stories I'd not heard of, and I wouldn't have known about them if I didn't have a subscription to lc.org's newsletter. So do that. Pray, and you can also financially support them as well, lc.org. All right, we'll be right back after this break.